Good evening and welcome. Nice to be with you, as always. Okay, let's do the announcements here. So our next retreat will be in Sedona, April 3rd through the 6th, and there's a couple spots open for that. So if you're interested, please email me. Also, next weekend, March 16th, this is 2025. I don't think I'll be here for satsang, and there's even a chance that I'll miss the 23rd. So just look on Facebook, and I'll tell you on Facebook if I am doing it. If I am doing it. The 23rd, I should be able to make it back in time, but I'm not certain. So, and there's always a chance. Like I live in Colorado, and we have big challenges with weather, and so it's possible I'll be here on the 16th. So just look on Facebook. Okay. I think those are the announcements. Yeah, yeah. So the next thing I'd like to acknowledge is, especially for the Europeans, is we had our time change. That's why we're meeting at this time, whatever this time is. It's confusing for me what time it is right now. But over the next couple of weeks, different countries do the time change at different times. So just make sure you pay attention. It's 7 p.m. Mountain Time, US. So yeah, okay. Be conscious of that until our time changes realign. And then I love it. Some people don't do time changes. And so anyways, all that time zone math is too much for my brain to think about. All right, I'd like to bring forward a new teaching tonight. And, one of the reasons I'm bringing this forward is, well, somebody asked me about it. And another reason is I just noticed that the word awakening has been so overplayed and so overused. We're not even sure what it means to be awake anymore. When I first stepped on the path, being awake was a big deal, and it had to do with enlightenment. For a lot of people now, it means that they vote a certain way, or they're having some type of energetic spiritual experience. And, that's not really what being awake means. And so I want to talk about something. It's something that I've kind of smiled at in the past, but I want to go for it. So there's this new language that's been used in the last 10 years or so, this shift from 3D consciousness into 5D consciousness. And I was even with someone who was taking us into 7D, and then just like kept going, and it would change every year, what dimension we were in. And for a lot of people, you can just see through it right away. Well, like, what are we actually talking about? And so let's define what 3D reality is. 3D reality is what most everyone on planet Earth lives in. It's a reality of duality. And duality means right versus left, good versus evil, black versus white, US versus Russia, Russia against Ukraine, Israel, versus Hamas, whatever it is. And if we're deeply honest, which is a very hard thing to do in 3D reality, if we're deeply honest, we'll see that we're all a sucker for whatever our tribe is telling us. And whether it's the COVID narrative, whether it's, the liberal narrative, the woke narrative, the conservative narrative, the CNN narrative, the Fox narrative. It's very hard for people when they're in a narrative to actually be honest about it. Like I said, I complained about this last week, but when I get on Facebook to begin to start the live stream, I see a lot of my spiritual teacher colleagues, posting, well, this is what CNN thinks about whoever. And it's like, that's tribal consciousness. CNN is bought and paid for by Big Pharma and by the Defense Department. And so it's hard to be honest when you're deeply influenced. In 3D reality, we don't even know. We don't even know that we are being influenced and manipulated. In 3D reality, the forces that are in charge, they pay lots and lots of money to keep us divided, to keep us fighting against each other. In 3D reality, wars and medicine are profitable. And this is something that, a long time ago, I think it was John F. Kennedy, but it might have been someone else, warned us, about this, the military industrial complex. And then, of course, just big pharma. And, I can go on and on, but, when I go on and on in this way, a lot of people get upset. And then a lot of people glaze over. When they get upset or they glaze over because they're stuck in 3D reality. So what are the tenets of stepping into 5-dimensional reality? Is the tenet of unity, where one is more interested in love. One is more interested in unity than tribal consciousness. And so, well, what does this mean? It means if we hate, Elon Musk or Donald Trump or AOC, like if we hate these people, or Nancy Pelosi, or if we hate these people, our hatred will keep us stuck. And for some people, politics isn't their thing. For some people, it's, I hate narcissists. I have this war against narcissism that goes on in my consciousness. And it's like, a number of people in the Sangha, could meet with me and just talk session after session about this narcissist and that narcissist. And again, I'm not saying that, narcissism isn't true or that we don't have real complaints about government officials. I mean, any person in a place of power, you have every right to have a complaint about that individual. You have every right to have a complaint about your brothers and sisters, or your mother or father, or your narcissist this, but in 3D reality, we really honor, especially in this day and age, we really honor trauma and the trauma worldview, and the trauma contextual reality, which is somebody hurt me, and therefore my ego is imploding. In 5-dimensional reality, to make the step from 3D to 5D, we have to do this crazy thing that Jesus taught us about. We have to love our enemy. And in 3D reality, it's like, there is no way I would ever love my enemy in 3D reality. In 5D reality, it's of course. Of course I love my enemy. Through loving my enemies, I have no enemies. And I invite the transformation of planet Earth, the transformation of human consciousness. Now, I can tell you, last night I stayed up a little bit late. And I watched my friend Kramer on Seinfeld. And Kramer went and he visited the zoo. And at the zoo, when he got there, a a monkey threw a banana peel at Kramer. And so he got angry and threw the banana peel back at the monkey. He threw it back. This is 3D reality. You hurt me, I'm going to hurt you back. And then the whole show was like Kramer, like trying to figure out, like, is he going to apologize to the monkey? He said, well, the monkey threw it at me first. He threw the banana peel at me first. It's not fair. And this is what 3D reality consists of. You hurt me, so I'm going to hold on to a grudge. And I don't want to forgive you because you hurt me. I want to make you pay. And 5D reality is forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. They're confused. And I see they're confused. So I'm going to meet them with love. In 5D reality, we choose to govern ourself. We govern ourselves. And through governing ourselves, we create and manifest a whole new way of being, a whole new consciousness, a whole new worldview. We create a whole new reality. You hurt me and I love you. You're kind to me and I love you. You hurt me again and I love you again. And when you come into contact with my love, you realize, oh, there's another way here on planet Earth. Another way of being, another way of doing. In 5D reality, each individual has their own power, their own governance. In 3D reality, it's, oh, you voted for Trump, you're a bad guy. Or, oh, you voted for Harris and you're on the team that failed, the team that lost, the team that's losing. In 3D reality, it's, oh, my brothers and sisters align with daddy who's the narcissist because they want the inheritance, or, whatever it is. In 5D reality, we shine the light of unity in all directions. And we're not concerned what the tribes are doing, how the tribes are fighting. So, of course, in 5D reality, we don't believe in war. We believe in love. In love. In 3D reality, there could be this whole philosophical debate around war. Oh, war can be just in certain situations. And the Ukraine war, oh my God, it is absolutely just. Or this war with my father, this war with my brother, this war with my sister. It's just because I believe it to be so. And the reason I believe it to be so is because whatever tribal news stations I listen to have taught me that it's just. But behind the scenes, if we're honest, we see the same stations, that tell us to keep taking this medicine that makes us sick, that we need to keep supporting and fanning the flames of war. It's like, what's going on here on planet Earth? It's 2025. 2025. And we're still bombing each other, still shooting each other. We're still diagnosing each other, calling everyone, except for us, a narcissist. This is 3D reality, and we all know it. But some of us are saying, hey, wait a minute. I'm getting sick of this reality. Doesn't seem to be leading anywhere. doesn't seem to lead anywhere. And so as we transition out of 3D into 5D reality, the old power structures that this world has been engaged in, you'll see that they're crumbling. They're falling apart. And this year of 2025, I want to call it a year of great awakening, a great shift, where things are being brought into the light. Things are being brought into the light. We see that politicians are bought and paid for. We see that often our friends and family are just plugged in to tribal consciousness. And because of that, they have great trouble being honest and taking accountability. In 5D consciousness, it's all about love, self-governance, and taking accountability. That you are in charge. In 3D reality, we're waiting for someone to do it for us. The great Guruji, the spiritual teacher. We're waiting for Jesus to come again. We're waiting for our governments to save us. And I can remember, and I've told this a lot, but I can remember when President Obama was elected and we just thought there was this coming of this new age. He's going to save us all. Obama is going to be this great thing. And well, what happened during Obama? The Iraq war continued. The Afghan war continued. And I'm not arguing whether Obama was a good man or a bad man. I liked Obama. But in 3D consciousness, we put our faith in a leader of a tribe. In 5D consciousness, we place our faith in our own divinity. We plug into our depths and we see that within us, is this massive power. This massive presence, omnipresence, omnipotence, where we realize that I am one with God. We don't look to the outside. We look to the inside. And on the inside, if we find something that is wrong, that is hurting, that is confused, that is twisted, we choose to heal the thing. In 3D consciousness, we blame and we retell the story of how so-and-so hurt me. And that's why I feel this way. And I'm not in control of my feelings. I'm a victim of my feelings. That's 3D consciousness. 5D consciousness is I choose to co-create my feelings and my experience. And I may be hurting because of things that happened here on planet Earth, but we see hurt as a challenge, an opportunity to step into our omnipotence. In 3D, it's an opportunity to blame. It's like, my dad did this to me. He was an alcoholic. And you've heard me speak a lot from 3D consciousness. But now is the time for us to shift as a Sangha. It's a time for the whole world to shift. But in order for us to shift, we have to be willing to be humble enough to tell the truth. In particular, about where we are tribally identified. And some of you, say, Craig, I hate it when you talk about politics. I'm talking about tribalism here. I use the right and the left because it's the easiest way to speak about tribalism. But our tribe can be the tribe of victims, the tribe of empaths, the tribe who's the underdog, the tribe who are refugees, the tribe who is, some, sexual orientation or some gender identity or some, age group or this or that. But these are all tribes, and each tribe comes with a program. And these programs keep us stuck. To step into 5D consciousness, we wake up and we say, I choose love first. I choose unity over all division. I will not choose a side, right or left. I will not choose a side, black or white. I will not choose a side, this or that, Russia or Ukraine, Israel or Palestine, Sunni or Shia. I will not choose a side. I will stand in unity and love all beings. And I will love this world. Sometimes the side that we're in is, I hate this world. A lot of spiritual people hate planet Earth. It's a funny thing. I was like that when I was young. I hated, just hated this world. Hated it. Didn't want to be here. I wanted to be in heaven. When I was a kid, who was it? It was the big bad evil corporations. And it was Ronald Reagan I hated. As we step into 5D, we don't look at presidents. We don't look at politics. We don't look at tribes. We don't look at family members with hatred. Now, please, I said this last week. Of course, you vote according to the highest truth in your heart. But the grand illusion in the 3D world is everyone thinks they vote from the highest truth in their heart. But normally they just vote according to whatever news station they listen to. And the news tells them who to vote for. The tribe, the family system. I was laughing a little bit. This was a couple months ago, but someone who was meeting with me and someone in the Sangha, and they were looking to get married, and their parents, were not happy because they weren't hanging out with a young Chinese man. And I've heard this a lot. They weren't getting married to a young Chinese man, or they weren't getting married to a young Jewish man or a good Christian man. It's like, that's 3D thinking. We think according to our tribe. According to our tribe. In 5D, we love all beings. All beings. Here's something from our good friend Jesus here. But anyone who hates a brother or sister is in the darkness and walks around in the darkness. They do not know where they are going because the darkness has blinded them. They do not know where they are going because the darkness has blinded them. Because it has blinded them. In 5D reality, we wake up out of the darkness and we see through the eyes of love. We see through the eyes of self-governance. Self-governance. I really like this term, self-governance. And I like playing with some new language here because, again, like I said in the beginning, the word awakening has been so watered down. So watered down. That most people, they call themselves awake, and it's like, I don't even know what they're talking about. I don't even know what they're talking about. 5D is a view that is beyond the pairs of opposites, is the way the Buddha would put it. Beyond the pairs of opposites. What does that practically mean? There's no us and there's no them. We see this as one world consciousness. One world consciousness. And we hold this higher vibration as an invitation to invite our other brothers and sisters, all fellow beings, into this unified whole. And it takes tremendous courage to look at division, to look at one's bias, and to not touch it. To say, okay, I see that, and I'm going to not touch that. I'm not going to act it out. I'm not going to guilt or blame or shame. I'm going to unpack my bias. I'm going to step away from my tribe. And I'm going to step into this world consciousness, a consciousness of wholeness. And it's not a consciousness that will value a Ukrainian instead of valuing a Russian. Now, again, you are fully welcome to disagree with Mr. Putin, with Mr. Trump, Mr. Biden, whoever it is. Fully welcome to disagree with their way. But we find a way to do this that doesn't include hatred. It doesn't include hatred. It isn't calling them a fascist or a Nazi or whatever it is. If we want the world to change, in 5D consciousness, we pray for the world leaders. We pray for the awakening of humanity. We pray for the light to triumph over the darkness. We don't give in to the darkness. Because what happens when we give into the darkness? Let's see what it says here. We don't know where we're going because the darkness has blinded us. That's why we don't give into darkness. That's why we don't give into hatred. And for some of you, this hatred is just very, very subtle. Sometimes it's this feeling of, I'm awake and therefore I'm better. We could even do it with 5D consciousness. I'm in 5D consciousness. They're in 3D consciousness. So any view has a shadow, and we have to remember this. We have to remember this. I've been around 5D people who've been highly judgmental. I'm like, I don't think that's 5D. I don't think that's not 5D. It's not awake. It's not loving. It's not unified. Just like any time we take a step on the path of spiritual awakening, these new teachings that we adopt can be used to spiritually bypass. And I've seen it, the big shadow with 5D consciousness is, well, sometimes it doesn't honor physical reality, and it doesn't honor one's trauma and one wounding. But a true 5D consciousness isn't a spiritual bypass. It's like a true spiritual awakening isn't a spiritual bypass. It's a love that includes all. That includes all. It's a love that self-governs, that looks out at life and says, oh, I think I may be confused. Where we look for our own confusion first. First, we look for our own confusion first before we blame another. In 3D consciousness, it's like we don't even think about blame. It's just right there. We know it. The news tells us who to blame, and we already know it. Our tribe tells us who to blame, and we already know it. We don't question it. We don't question it in 3D. In 5D, we question our beliefs, our assumptions, our information. Say, where does this information come from? Who pays for it? Who pays for it? We're willing to look behind the curtain and see, oh, like my God, especially since COVID, every single news station, just the corporate legacy media was bought and paid for by Pfizer. It's absolutely insane. This thing that was supposed to be free and unbiased was completely biased. Completely biased. The very companies starting wars and waging wars, the ones who own the media companies. It's like I saw the funniest thing that, well, I won't go too much into it, but I have to be careful because it just, some people just can't handle it. Can't handle it. In 5D, integrity, honesty, telling the truth, investigating the truth is your spiritual strength. In 3D, we do what the mob does. We go to the riot, we go to the protest because our friends are there. Because we saw it on social media. In 5D, we ask our heart, what is the truth? What is the truth? And we're willing to be wrong. We're willing to see through our own illusions. And again, as we self-govern, because the world is a mirror, it is through us self-governing that our world governments will stop being so corrupt. Through us forgiving, the world wakes up to compassion. Through us loving ourselves, that helps the world to choose love. Helps the world to choose love. And so I can assure you that this year, 2025, is going to continue with all kinds of chaos and wildness. And the great difficulty when chaos happens, again, is for us to go with the mob. And the question is can we stand outside the chaos? Can we be the ones who anchor in the truth? Can we be the ones who anchor in the light? Can we be the ones who choose to love? Who choose to love? Who choose to be honest? Who choose to say, I was wrong. I was wrong. I saw this beautiful thing on Instagram the other day. I don't know who it was. It was just some Instagram influencer. She was a Democrat and she had like 100,000 followers. And she said, look, I'm waking up out of my party. I see that my party has lied to me again and again and again for years, and I cannot stand it any longer. Now, keep in mind, like we could have a same person from the Republican Party. For forever, the Republican Army was all about war. In fact, there was a fella who I think he got in big trouble recently because he was receiving so much money. Of course, it's like all politicians receive so much money from big pharma and from the companies that wage war. Who are those? Raytheon and it used to be Halliburton was the big one. But anyways, you get the idea. And I'm not picking on the Democratic Party. I'm saying now is the time for us to wake up out of tribalism, out of this confusion. It was just beautiful to see this person being deeply honest. Here they were with all their followers, and they said, I've had enough. I can't stand it any longer. I can't stand it any longer. The lies, the BS, the manipulation, I can't stand it any longer. All these arguments are so insane. It's a waste of our time, but it keeps us divided. If this world is going to change, if there is going to be a great awakening, it starts with you and I. You and I making 1,000,000 small steps. Every week, every month, choosing the truth. Choosing to say, you know what? I was wrong. I made mistakes. I failed. Forgive me. Forgive me for I have failed. Forgive me, I put my foot in my mouth. Forgive me, I was angry. Forgive me, I was confused. Forgive me, I drank the Kool-Aid. It wasn't the good Kool-Aid. It was the kind of manipulation, and I believed in it. Forgive me. I got carried away with my ego. Forgive me. I wasn't listening to you fully. Forgive me. Forgive me. I believed in fear. I heard this thing the other day about fear. What did they say fear was? False evidence appearing real. That's normally what fear is, unless you're being chased, by a saber-toothed tiger. But I don't think we have those anymore. I don't think we have those, but false evidence appearing real. All day long, we have that in our mind. All day long. False evidence appearing real. And it's human. It's human to be tricked, to be fooled. It's human to align with the tribe. It's human to align with our family. It's human to align with some spiritual dogma. It's human to stand behind us and say, my God is the best. It's just in fifth dimensional reality. It's like, what do you mean my God is the best? Fifth dimensional reality is there's one God. This God has many names and many forms. And his God is the very fabric of our consciousness. And God grows and evolves here on planet Earth through me loving me and through me loving you. In fifth dimensional reality, God dies through me judging you and you judging me. In fifth dimensional reality, God grows and triumphs through me letting go of judgment, through me letting go of tribalism, through me seeing all beings as a manifestation of God. All beings. In the fifth dimension, we pray. We pray for our enemies. We pray for those who've hurt us, who've wronged us. In the fifth dimension, we are in charge of our experience of how we feel, how we react, how we respond to life. And so let's have a little fun, leaving 3D behind. And anytime you leave something behind, it's going to be a little bit messy. There's going to be some chaos. I can remember when, I was in high school. I had a lot of friends in high school, and we used to live way out in the country. We had a kind of a big piece of land out in the country. And so sometimes all my friends would come over and we'd have these big wild parties and bonfires, and we drink lots of beer and light stuff on fire and blow things up, typical typical country stuff. And so but at some point, I realized, like I'm done with this. And I came out here to Colorado and I left it behind. I left it behind. And sometimes when you step out of one reality into a new reality, you might lose some old friends. I can tell you, I still love all my old friends. But there was just a movement of saying, okay, it's time to move forward. It's time to move forward. And I don't look back, but if they come forward, I'll say hi and I'll smile and I'll give them a big hug. But I don't look back. Don't look back. I can remember I was working for my parents one day. They had like a family business. And I got in this guy's office and, I was fixing his printer and he was asking me about my high school football team and how they were doing. It's like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know how my high school football team's doing. That reality is dead to me. Now, I didn't say that because he was so into it. Like, he was so excited about high school football, but there was just nothing in me. Just like with the Super Bowl, there's nothing in me with the Super Bowl. I got nothing. I got nothing with that. I got nothing there. I live in a different reality. Different reality. Where football doesn't mean anything to this one. Now, if it means something to you, it's beautiful. Enjoy it. Have fun with it. Doesn't mean you can't play here on planet Earth. But in the fifth dimension, we're interested in the unification of humanity, unification of one's consciousness, and the great stepping forward so that the light can triumph once and for all over darkness. And sometimes if you look online and you start connecting to, I want to just have a little fun here with the alien species. The alien species, of course, if they're visiting us, they must be more evolved than us. And the alien species that, talk to us, that get channeled down. Again, like that's not really my world, but the ones that, are being channeled, they speak about supporting humans, choosing the light over darkness, choosing love, choosing compassion, choosing the great awakening. The great awakening, where we are ruled by the light instead of being ruled by whatever's happening in Moscow or Washington, D.C. or Kiev or wherever it is. We're ruled by the light, by the light, by truth. And truth is not a divisive thing. It's a liberating and inclusive thing. And so one of the things I wanted to acknowledge that, as like sometimes as we leave, what we could call it like the old high school consciousness. If you remember that summer, where you were leaving high school, you were leaving your secondary school and stepping into something greater. Like for me, there was just a tremendous amount of chaos. Like all my friends, it was like, who's going where? Who's going to what college? A lot of my friends went to this big college, Ohio State. And, at Ohio State, it was just a different tribe. I can remember, so I had some friends invite me to go to an Ohio State football game once. And I don't know what happened. I don't know who won the game or who lost. But all I knew is outside in the streets, there were helicopters floating above. They had like the riot light, shining down on us. People were overthrowing cars. I was just like, this is crazy. This is crazy. I'm going out west. I'm going to the mountains. I don't want to be in this reality. It's not the truth. To overthrow someone's cars because of football. Because of football. Anyways, thank you all for letting me speak a little bit here and about these, this new reality that I'm inviting us to step into. And I'm not going to get too attached to 3D or 5D. To be honest, I really like working with the term spiritual awakening and enlightenment. But again, these terms have been so overplayed that it's hard to even use them anymore. It's hard to use them anymore. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears here. And I received a lot of questions this week. I received some really long questions. And so I'll see if I can work with them, quickly. But let's just do this. Let's just do this. Before we get into the questions, I want to invite us to close our eyes and to begin to feel into our hearts. And whether you like, this topic tonight about 3D or 5D reality, I want to invite you just to ask yourself, what falsehoods have been floating around in your consciousness for too long? What unrealities have been living rent-free in your mind and in your heart? Perhaps there's been judgment of sister, brother, mother, father, some individual in your life. And often the voice of judgment, or the voice of blame, the voice of tribal consciousness is normally the loudest voice within us. But as we come into contact with the heart, see, the voice of the heart is be very gentle, very innocent and pure. But as you feel into your heart, you see it has a truth to it, a power, a light. And together as a Sangha, I'm going to invite us to make a step of letting go of something old and stepping into this deeper truth that you've known all along. We know that love is the way, that unity is the way, that compassion is the way. And together, can we make a choice to choose that which is higher? And this is really how we step into 5D, is through choosing the higher vibrational frequency, through choosing the light, through choosing love. I can even feel it in the room that there's been this shedding of something old, of something old. And the next question, I'm going to invite you just to look and see if there's something in your social media sphere that has influenced you tribally. And if you can be willing just to see that this is groupthink. And there may be some confused forces here at play. It could be something just as simple as when you watch the news, they should really call it just the bad news. The bad news. The bad news of the day. Normally it aligns with one party or the other, but it's normally just the bad news. So can you just take a moment and look, what are the influences that come into your field? That have worked to condition, is the Buddhist word, have conditioned your innocence, have conditioned your humanity. And can we begin to unplug from some of those influences? Unplug from external influences and choose to plug into oneself, into one's light, one's love, one's goodness, one's power, one's divinity. And again, if you just take a moment to notice This is very subtle shift of getting more of your power back and more of your innocence coming online. Feeling a sense of self-governance. A sense of illumination. A sense of divinity that is shared by all beings. And we can smile there, knowing all beings are made of the fabric of God. The same light. The same light. And so, we'll look at these questions here. Okay. Here's a fun question from David Morris. It's really long, but I'll say this. I'm just going to read it. He says, Craig, I remember a long while ago asking you the question of what purpose there was for God to put us humans through the torture, in quotes, of the Kundalini process. And I think your answer was to overcome your will. And I thought to myself, I'm willing to give up my will. So is that willingness and active will? Yeah, will is an interesting one. Because again, we have to look in the realm of spiritual awakening, in the realm of 5D consciousness. Like in 5D consciousness, your will is God's will. It's God's will. And we see that God's will is challenging our humanity to grow up, to wake up. It's challenging our humanity to be Christ-like. Now, in order for us to be Christ-like, God has to give us a cross. A cross. And when we face the cross and we meet it with love, we no longer need that cross any longer. We don't need to keep carrying it around and reminding ourselves of this. But the question is like from within the will of ego, can I let go of, my ego will? It's like, no, we can't do that. We have to step into a greater reality. You have to be willing to surrender the things that we're addicted to. Like you first have to admit you're powerless before you can become powerful. But his question goes on to say, as you can see from this question, and as you know about myself, one of my pleasures is the act of thinking. And people who have active minds, they always come with this question of free will. So if you are in your mind and you're identified with thought, you will think you have free will. Just like everyone who listens to corporate news media, they think they have free will about who they're voting for. But they're manipulated. They're in the darkness. So when we're in our mind, when we're addicted to thinking, there's no free will. Even if we say something philosophical like, I'm willing to let go of my will. The willingness to let go of will comes from deep in the belly. It doesn't come from the mind. It comes from deep in the belly, deep in the heart. So he goes on to write, I have thought many times that I like to talk to myself. Yeah, and I like this. There's a lot of honesty here. I try to stop it by saying to myself, blah, 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 showing to myself that I know how silly it is, the constant jabbering, liking to talk. But further looking, I think it's the act of thinking that I enjoy. I see it as a form of activity, somewhat like a dance that I do with myself. I guess I just like watching myself do things like thinking. Yeah, and this is one of the things of the ego is the ego never wants to stop thinking. And David, I want to be clear here, and for all Sangha members, it's just, I'm not saying the ego is bad. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying thinking is bad. But sometimes the mind, it just spins itself in philosophical circles. Or, like what was Billy Idol's song? It just dances with itself, you know? I can remember when I bought that on a cassette tape, Dancing with Myself, Billy Idol, and of course it can be fun. Like we can spin great stories. I was listening the other day to an alien abduction story. And this guy went on and on and on and on and on. And right from the beginning, I was like, I think this guy's just telling himself a story. I think he's just telling himself a story. But I kept listening because this fella held so much credit, in the UFO community. And I was like, I'm just going to keep listening and see. But the more he talked, I just saw he just had a really fantastical mind. And he just was going on and on and on. Like I used to receive these stories. I used to have people come into my office. This was early on. But a common thing back in the 80s, I wasn't practicing back in the 80s, but back in the 80s, there was all this talk about people who were abducted in satanic cults. And, when I first started practicing therapy, people would show up and they'd have this story about how they were abducted in a satanic cult. And they all told the same stories about the same rituals that were done to them. But none of them could actually point or locate, the cult building, the cult temple, where it was, who the people were. But it's just like this story is this fantastical story that floated around in human consciousness. And human consciousness gets this time to time. About these things, alien abductions or, satanic cults was the one back in the 80s. And I can remember like we were just terrified, just getting scooped up by the Satanist. It's just like a funny thing. But sometimes our mind just likes to tell itself stories. And in a sense, that's one of the reasons God created us, because in the beginning of time, there was just vast nothingness. And God said, let's tell some stories. Let's have some stories. God created life. And life is this great drama and these great stories. So there's nothing wrong with telling stories. But I will say that there is a different way to live. When we come down into the hara and we live in the mind of the hara, you realize that you stop telling yourself stories. But in order to stop telling ourselves stories, we have to face our greatest fears. And it's a funny thing, is through facing our greatest fears, the mind becomes extremely loud for a short period of time. And then it implodes and becomes silent. It becomes silent. And in this silence, we see that the will of the mind has fallen away. Now, David, if like David, you're an artist. So this is where things get a little messy here in the teaching. Artists are open to a creative flow. And that flow will come to you with words, with imagery, or whatever it is. Color and, dancing. I mean, just dancing light, dancing particles. And so as an artist, it's hard to turn this thing off. And, most artists are like, I don't want to turn it off. I don't want to turn this thing off. I enjoy it. I enjoy, artists like to dance. They like to create. They like to build. And so a great question for ourselves as we open in the Hara, and let's say we're an artist, we want to continue to create, is we invite God to create through us. God to move through us, speak through us, act through us, live through us, love through us. And then our job becomes a job of discernment. When we really look and we see what is it that moves through us is the truth, and what is it, is my mind just like playing with itself? And just, like when it's just playing with itself, it'll feel like a shallow fantasy. And of course, there's degrees of that. Like if anyone, ever looks at, like, say, the art of Andy Warhol, it's like, what are we looking at here? Like, what is this? And some people say, oh, it's a protest against, corporations, or it's a protest against, the status quo, or this or that. But like that type of art, was a step forward. It's just like just a little step forward. But when you see a giant cathedral, you see, oh, here's a movement of holiness, of divinity, of something quite incredible. Some of my ancestors were masons, and they built these giant cathedrals. And I've walked in these cathedrals, they built them, I could say 100 years ago, and I step into them now, and they're still full of light. They're full of love. They're full of radiance, because God's will is flowing through them. It's flowing through them. So David writes, I want to be in sync with the flow of God's will. All I know, and I know that my thoughts can stop the flow of Kundalini / God's will in my life. Yet God wants me to be me in this life on this planet. Yeah, I like this. David's bringing up some more nuance here. God wants me to be me. That's a great question. Well, what is me? Like, what are you in the depth of your being? God wants you to be that. And on the surface of your being, if you want to wear a tie-dye shirt, or you want to, I don't know, wear a Lakers jersey, or whatever people wear, or a t-shirt or a golf shirt, or this or that. It's like, yeah, by all means, like, paint the costume however you want. Like, paint yourself up however you want. But I can remember when I was a young boy, I always had terrible hair. So when I was 14, I had these big nappy dreadlocks. And then, of course, my younger brother, he had big nappy dreadlocks. And my dad had this thing as like, if you're going to live in this house, you got to cut that hair, And I can remember my younger brother just screaming at my dad, saying, "This is me," holding up his big, dreadlocks, saying, "This is me, this is me." And it's like, no, that's not you. That's hair growing out of your head. That's hair. Now you might like it, you might identify with it, and that's what we do when we're young. I guess people do it, most of their life. Sometimes I look in the mirror at myself and I'm like, who is that guy? Like who is that guy? He doesn't actually look the way I think he's supposed to look, or should look. He doesn't look the way, this presence feels, is what I'm really trying to say. And so, David, God wants you to be you. And by all means, sing, dance, enjoy, listen to your music, like do your thing. You be you. You be you. But God wants us to be the deepest you. And if the shallow you doesn't cause any problems, then it's no big deal. No big deal. But if the shallow us, again, is identified in some kind of tribal system, it's like, well, God doesn't want that. That's not the highest. God wants your innocence to live through you, your light to live through you, your creativity to live through you. And so that's the invitation here. As we open to God's will, oftentimes there's a great stripping away of everything unuseful, unnecessary. And by unnecessary, I mean the things that cause us unnecessary suffering. Unnecessary suffering. All the karmic weight that we carry around from the past. Like some people in the world of AA, they just identify with being an alcoholic for the rest of their life. It's like, that's an unnecessary thing to carry around with you the rest of your life. Now you may admit, like, okay, I shouldn't touch the stuff and that, like, it's not good for me. I'm not never going to drink again. But we don't have to identify with, carry around the idea and confess to everyone every week, like, I'm an alcoholic. So the things that we need to shed. I don't know if this thing even exists anymore, but once upon a time, there was this party called the Tea Party. It was like a super Republican, and it's just like we don't need to carry around and tell everyone I'm a part of the Tea Party. It's like, we don't need to do that anymore. We don't need to do that. I don't know if it does anything for us. I don't need to remind everyone that I have Irish lineage. Like I can use it as part of the teaching tool, but I don't need to remind anyone. I mean, it doesn't do anything for me. I don't need to identify with being Irish. I don't need to identify with being a certain age, a certain gender, a certain this or that. For you to be you, like if we all just take a moment and feel inside, it's like, what is me? Like most of us will feel this light, this luminosity, hopefully a subtle experience of bliss, fundamental sense of aliveness. That's the you. That's the you. But again, if the you wants to put on a tie-dye shirt, it's like, beautiful. I've wore tie-dyes before. I used to make them. In fact, I made some this year. Can't remember, but could have been for a Halloween costume or something. But again, just for fun, just for fun. If it's fun, lighthearted, no big deal. If it's a heavy and dense me, well, then that thing's probably holding you back. Holding you back. So by all means, you be you. The thing with our will, like one of the ways where we can spot our will, is that if we're challenged, our will freaks out. So like our will is so often tied into tribal consciousness. So when someone challenges your tribe, And all of a sudden your feathers get ruffled. It's like, okay, okay. Can I let go of that? Can I let go of that thing? Because that's human will. Whereas divine, in your divinity, when someone challenges your divinity, you don't get offended. You look out at them and you're like, oh, this person is obviously suffering. If someone challenges God's will, you just look at them and you know, oh, again, they're suffering. They're confused. They're in, let's have some fun, 3D consciousness. They're in 3D consciousness. But we don't say that in a judgmental way. We just see, okay, like they're still plugged into like that other reality, that old reality. They're not in this higher perspective. And that's why they're thinking that way. But I'm not judging them. It's just a sense of like, that's why they think that way. That's why they think that way. Like I've had this funny thing that like oftentimes when you're in New England, uh, let's make it real simple. If you're in New York City, people don't make eye contact and they're not smiling at you. They're looking in the opposite direction. But if you're in Atlanta, Georgia, or somewhere in the deep South, and you walk down the street, people smile and they say hello and they greet you. They look at you in the eyes and they might even say, God bless you. Say these sweet things. I know these are big generalizations, but there's different levels of consciousness here. And when we come into God's will, we come into God's light, we're not being guarded, we're not being defended. We don't need so much will to fight against or to fight for. We smile at humanity. Okay, I better move on. I got 2 questions here. David, I hope there was yeah, I think that's where I'm going to leave it. Okay. Here's a question from another David. Sincere thanks, Craig, for your light work and assisting others on the path. I'm experiencing yet again further increased chronic head pressure and bobblehead type, strong head, neck, upper body movements with full body spasms along with the roof of my mouth, tongue, teeth feeling like they're on fire. So these are Kundalini symptoms. For those who don't know, also experiencing other really vivid parallel realities every night, causing greater pain and little sleep. Each time I surrender, the pain and the kriyas increase and get much worse to the point that I feel like I'm going to explode. Is the solution to transcend and integrate this strong energetic suffering to still stay in fully surrendered state, or is there any advice to get through this? Yeah. So what do I do if there's too much energy in my body? I open, 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 and I let this energy flow and I let it dance and I let it be as wild and chaotic as can be. And I treat it like a bull, like pretty soon here, maybe in a couple months, there's going to be a rodeo that's going to be like every Wednesday night. It's funny. Every Wednesday night when I'm teaching the meditation, there'll be a rodeo that's like, if I threw a rock as hard as I could, like it'd probably land, in the parking lot for the rodeo, in the parking lot. So that's how close I am to the rodeo. So the rodeo does this thing. They have a bull, and that bull's full of energy, and someone's in the bull's in a pen, and someone's poking him. Now, when they open that gate, he's going to be bucking and just being crazy. But if you leave that bull alone for a couple of hours, I mean, hell, if you leave him alone for probably 25 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 7 minutes. He'll go out and he'll kick and snort and huff and puff. And then eventually he'll just calm down. He'll calm down. And so that's the old Zen teaching. And so we open and we let it flow. And we trust that the big open pasture will heal. Will heal. Now that's the general teaching with Kundalini. And that's the general teaching in every moment we have Kundalini, whether it's calm or it's wild, we give it tremendous open space. So we have to always do that. Always do that. But if the energy keeps intensifying, so say, for example, if we let the bull out of the pen and let's say he flips on his back and he's rubbing his spine on the dirt and just snorting, huffing and puffing and rolling all over and being wild as can be, sometimes we need to go in there and do some psychic surgery. In this case, like with a bull, it might be, oh, maybe he has something biting him. Maybe he's got a thorn, on his back. Maybe I don't know, something's going on with that bull. And so he needs some help. And so sometimes we have to say, okay, like what's going on in my body? Like, why is my body having, such intense energy? That it feels like my teeth are going to chatter, out of the head. Like if that's the case and it just keeps going on and on and on, it's like, well, we really need to look at ourselves and see, is there a blockage here? Is there a blockage? And for almost everyone, if we're humble enough, we can say, oh yeah, I've got a blockage. And the blockage is, too much thinking, too many spiritual concepts. Maybe the blockage is I judge my neighbor. Maybe the blockage is I don't have faith fully in God or fully in myself, because a lot of us, Kundalini challenges us to have faith in ourself, but we instead have faith in our body and we realize our body can't handle this. And that's true. Our body cannot handle it, but our presence can. And when we wake up and realize that we have faith in our presence, and our presence holds space for the body, then the body lets go, and then the Kundalini comes into alignment. I hope that made sense there. Like sometimes we have faith in our ego or our mind, or we have faith in our will instead of having faith in our divinity. And sometimes we have, like God will give us something that's really intense, which will break down our faith in our will or our ego. And keep in mind, everyone on planet Earth has faith in their own mind and their own ego. It's just a programming that comes with being human. So that's not something to you specifically, David. That's something that everyone has. And sometimes this Kundalini comes and it comes so intense. And we have faith in our mind. That just means we're still holding on to something in our mind. We're holding on to some ego identity. And our ego identity starts screaming, I can't do this. I can't handle this. And that's actually the truth. I, the ego, can't do this, can't handle this. But you, the presence, is absolutely big enough to. And so sometimes it's us, we need to wake up to this peace that we are. You might call that transcendence. Knowing yourself as this absolute peace. But in the head, neck, throat, teeth area, I'm always going to ask, is there a strong judge or critic here? Or is there one who tries to control? And any and every voice of control or criticism or judgment has to be cleared out so that the Kundalini can flow right through the central channel. Okay, so the other one is, here's another possibility here, because David, you and I have spoken about this before, but another possibility is sometimes we need to learn how to have what I'll call yogic control. A different word for that is, called like a gentle discipline. this is talked about in the Yoga Sutras, is gently guiding the Kundalini Shakti right through the center. And this takes a high degree of discipline, but it's a discipline that is gentle, that is open, that's fluid, that's relaxed and at ease. Most of us, whenever we try to control the Kundalini, we do it in a forceful way. Almost everyone makes that mistake. And the invitation here is like sometimes the Kundalini is flowing up through the center and there's nothing wrong. And then just out of a habit of running into a blockage, it shoots to the right or to the left, and it creates these very violent kriyas. And it could be helpful to just gently steer the Kundalini, gently guide it right through the central channel. And this comes through just practicing, the breath of the microcosmic orbit where we're breathing in, gently, intuitively guiding the Kundalini through our subtle energetic body right through the central channel, up and out the top of the head, and then down the front, pulling at the feet. And as we inhale again, gently coming up again. And this takes a tremendous amount of practice to be able to gently guide the Kundalini to flow directly through the center without forcing it. Without forcing it. And this takes time and it takes a gentle effort. And most everyone, myself included, err on the side of far too much effort. And this is one of those spiritual mastery things where we're gently guiding, in a sense, like when the energy is like it is with you, we're gently guiding a horse that's like one of these wild Mustangs. Like when I'm getting ready to travel next week, but when I do, like I'll drive through Indian country and it's just full of wild horses everywhere. And if you just imagine getting on one of those wild horses, like it's going to be a wild ride. But in order to tame that horse, I mean, there's different schools of thought, but one of the schools of thought is we tame them with supreme gentleness. Supreme gentleness. But while you're taming, a wild Mustang with supreme gentleness, you have to have absolute faith in your divinity, that you are big enough, that you are the boss, that you are the master. And of course, the you that I'm speaking to is the spiritual you, not the ego you. The ego you is made up of control programs. Like the ego, like so much of the ego psychology is just about control. It's all about control. And so it's learning how to control from a place of the most gentle effort. And gently guiding. And at first, it just seems like an absolute lost cause, trying to guide this wild energy. But we keep returning to the center and the central channel, gently guiding that energy right through the center. And so seeing it and visualizing it, envisioning it, flowing right through the center, even if we have the most wild bobblehead action that's happening. And so, David, I'm going to encourage you to play with these things, my friend, to play with these things. Beautiful question. Okay. We're just going to do one more question here. It's also a Kundalini one. My question is, my higher self showed me how to awaken, how my awakening would partake until I started to see dark entities in the subconscious. What can I do to help clear these blocks before I have a full awakening? I've noticed energy stirring in my stomach when I try to manifest abundance or when I meditate, as well as energy in my tailbone. Is this a sign of Kundalini energy? Yeah, if you feel energy stirring in your tailbone and in your belly, that's a Kundalini energy. Absolutely. Absolutely. But really their question is, what do I do when these dark entities come to town? Yeah. I've spoken about this a lot, but entities in some sense are similar to bullies. They look for people who are weak. And please don't take that personally, but it's just what bullies do, and it's what entities do. I saw this thing the other day. There was some study where basically it was done in a prison, and they showed these violent offenders video footage of it's like, people walking by on a street in New York City, and they just asked the question, like, who would you pick on, like who would you prey upon? And the criminals, they had a big pool of criminals because they're out of jail, and the criminals all chose the same people. They just spotted them in the crowd. They didn't know them. They weren't there. It was video footage. And it was a funny thing because, these violent criminals and narcissists, they have a kind of mind where they can look and they see the people who are vulnerable, who have weakness in their field. And it's a particular type of weakness. And often there's this thing that happens, and I don't want anyone to hear weakness from a judgmental perspective, but a lot of people who have been abused, they end up having a power deficiency in their field because they didn't have a mom or a dad who loved them fully and completely and who built them up and helped them to be strong and taught them about their light and their resiliency and their beauty. They had parents that preyed upon them, or one parent who preyed upon them. And because of that, they have a deficiency in their field. I had major deficiencies in my field. And when we have this, it makes us an easy target for bullies, for narcissists, and for dark entities. And so the teaching will be really simple here. Anything you can do to heal those wounds, so meeting them with love, with kindness, with compassion, and teaching yourself about your innate worthiness, your innate goodness. Teaching yourself that you are worthy of having boundaries, learning about boundaries, developing boundaries, being able to implement boundaries. Oftentimes people who struggle with dark entities also have big issues around fear. But they have the issues with the fear first, and through the doorway of fear, like what fear does is it literally puts holes in our consciousness. The same thing with trauma. Like when you have trauma in your conscious, it puts holes in your consciousness. That's why it's so important to do our trauma work, because you do your trauma work, you actually heal those holes. And then you're less likely to be a target of abuse. And so when we're struggling with dark entities, we need to look inside. And again, this is that 5D self-governance thing, as we say, okay, there's some holes within me. I've got some back doors that don't have locks on them, or some windows that are open in my house, or maybe broken windows. And I need to fix these windows. So we scan our consciousness and we see, but we have to be willing to look, because oftentimes like these holes are in our shadow. So we have to be willing to go into our shadow and say, oh, look, okay, I see. I have issues with authority. Like that was my big issue. Like I had all these issues with authority. And then guess who preyed upon me? Authority figures. It's just like there's this perfect mirror. I had issues with authority, and then authority figures preyed upon me. And when I did my healing work, around my issues with the big bad boogeyman authority figures, and it's a funny thing. When I started to friend the police started to friend me, and they stopped messing with me. But when I was angry and scared of the police, I'd just drive down the road and they'd always pull me over. They just constantly be pulling me over. I can't tell you how many times I was pulled over, when I was younger. Sometimes I'd be pulled over, like 8 times a year. Be like, damn, I don't even drive that much. Get pulled over 8 times. And what they always say, they always come up with something. You touched the line is what they say. Like, oh yeah, I touched the line. And I'd hate them and I'd hate them. Then they pull me over again, a couple of weeks later. But when I started to make friends, with quote unquote authority figures, when I did my healing work, stop getting pulled over. Stop getting pulled over. I was no longer picked on. And so in a similar way with dark entities, we have to do our work. And in a sense, like spiritual awakening, what are we waking up out of? What did we say earlier? False evidence appearing real. That's what we're waking up out of. We're waking up out of false evidence appearing real. People think spiritual awakening is just something that happens to us. When dark entities come to us, we need to look at them and see this too is God. This isn't the devil. If you want to be awake, call it the devil. Call it a demonic force. Excuse me, I don't know if I said that right. If you want to be asleep, call it the devil, call it a demonic force. If you want to be awake, you look at it and you say, oh, this too is God. Just a lower manifestation of God, confused version of God, a hurting version of God, a traumatized version of God, a narcissistic version of God. If you want to be asleep, call it the devil. Say it's a dark entity and go pay a healer to free you from the dark entities. And you'll find they'll come back next week. So in 5D reality, we self-govern. We love ourselves. We love our enemies. And as we do so, we heal, we open, the blockages clear, and the Kundalini flows uninhibited. Uninhibited. I once had so much Kundalini that it caused me to have seizures all the time. I have all that Kundalini now, and I can sit here still as day. I'm as still as a mountain. It doesn't move me because there's not a lot of holes. There's not being attacked by dark entities. There's not things preying upon me. It's not running into a bunch of egoic blockages or traumatic blockages or confused parts of my psyche or split off aspects of my inner child or, whatever it is. Whatever it is. So anyways, so much love to each of you. Let us close our eyes and let us invite and pray and envision the awakening of humanity. Seeing all of humanity waking up out of darkness, out of tribal thinking, out of pain and confusion, and joining together in the light. Seeing this world full of love and happiness and joy. Seeing the earth plane being restored to harmony and balance. The earth's oceans and mountains and rivers and deserts and skies being restored in harmony. Seeing humanity and all of God's creation, all of this beautiful earth, living in unity, living in peace, living in love. And so much love to each of you, so much respect as well. Thank you for sharing your hearts with me. And please, in the coming weeks, please keep checking that time zone math. And like I said, I probably won't be here on, I think it's the 16th of March, 2025. I'll be traveling that day, I believe. Okay, good night, everyone. See you soon. Bye.